This is the EnT podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located in Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Menakwisk in St. John, New Brunswick, which is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik Maliseet people.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 45 of the EnT podcast. And this is actually the first episode that we recorded in the year of somebody's Lord, 2024. How are you doing, Doug? What's the new year been like for you thus far, pal?
It's been pretty good. I've got to do a bunch of lifelong learning stuff, and if I sound raspy today, I've just spent the last 2 days in a curling rink sweeping a lot. So I got a little bit of lung burn because I'm not 17 or 18 anymore, and I'm just learning how to do stuff. So, but it's been great. It's been wonderful for me.
So this has been like your first winter participating in the sport, yeah?
I did this same Bonspiel last year.
Okay.
Because I have a friend that's a really good curler and super nice and stuff. And she's like, oh, could you come do it? We just need to. It's one of these fun spiels. I don't know all the language. We're learning it.
So you need enough people for the team, basically.
Yeah. And I may not know how to throw or slide the rocks, but I can sure sweep. I've spent my life practicing sweeping stuff. So
radical. Well, that sounds pretty dope, to use a contemporary term, which I respect curling. There was actually, not to go too far into sidetrack land, but do you remember the Canadian film Men with Brooms?
Yes.
That's one of the few Canadian films that I can remember, like, reaching the Cineplex even. And, actually, I made a point just because it was, like, so rare. And it had the dude from, that show about the Mountie as the main actor, right?
Yep.
Okay.
He had also just done Passchendaele, the movie about World War I.
Yes. Can't remember the chap's name, but
no, it's escaping
anyway.
me too.
So why don't you just guide us through what we're talking about here today, bud, for the topic?
So today I want to talk about exclusionary language.
Okay.
And it's going to be about education. It's going to be about healthcare. That's where most of the research is.
Okay.
But going and curling for 2 days, and with all of their words, it's like, oh, I don't know what anything means. Somebody just give me a yes or a no on when I start sweeping and when I stop sweeping. And what do these hand signals mean? What am I supposed to do when you tap your broom and then do that thing? It's one of those, I was such an outsider wanting to be an insider. And I thought that would be a nice, gentle way to come into the rant that I'm going to do about things like TLAs. I don't know what your thoughts are on TLAs.
I know that I've made the notes into WordPress, but I'm going to be honest, pal. You're talking TLAs. What does that even mean? What's the acronym there?
3-letter abbreviations.
Oh,
why did I make an abbreviation out of 3-letter abbreviations? That's how exclusionary we are with our language sometimes. So sorry, okay. I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus. I was just trying to use that as an example.
Sure, no, absolutely. That's a very it's legit. So I guess from my perspective, when we're talking about this kind of thing, my local reference point or whatever, I'm not sure if you're familiar, Doug, with the novels of Cormac McCarthy, the American author. He's kind of a legendary fiction writer, and he's had films directed, made by of a couple of his novels, including No Country for Old Men, and some others, right? And his last couple of books before he passed away last year were published last year, and I'm just actually now. I've made kind of a mini sort of resolution to try and read one book per week, like not necessarily like professional, but like strictly just literature or whatever, because that was like my original passion for like a lot of years. And at a certain point, you know, I had this kind of notion of being like a paid professional fiction writer or, you know, something within that field. But, you know, that just ended up not being what I was going to be ultimately suited to. So, but I can still. So when I'm talking about language here, I'm looking at like these novels by these two interrelated novels, The Passenger and Stella Morris, and he just pulls out these words that you never have ever heard except in Cormac McCarthy novels, and then you actually start looking it up, and you go, okay, that is like a piece of language from some kind of whatever. It's almost as though using that language, he's being both precise, but you actually got to stop. And I consider myself a pretty smart guy when it comes to vocab related stuff, but you have to, the flow of the story is so compelling, but then you gotta put the book down and you gotta run over to the computer and punch in this word. You could skip over it. You could skip over the word, but it would drive you nuts to skip over it because then you wouldn't get the full weight of the narrative. So it's sort of this jerk and tug, but all the while it's kind of making you a better reader and a better appreciator, I suppose, somebody who appreciates fiction and life through fiction. So that's kind of where my thinking went to that in terms of language. And so hence Blood Meridian, and the background here is a detail from a painting to go with one of the covers of that novel. Yeah, so no AI on this one, just anyway. So that's kind of my standpoint on it, Bud. So I guess now we've kind of sort of etched out our starting positions here. Why don't you just take us through to the first reference point here, dude?
I'm going to stop and go to connect to what you just said with my attempt to read Ulysses by James Joyce.
Oh.
I tried a bunch of times. I was in Ireland and my brother was like, hey, your birthday's coming up. What do you want? And I'm like, I would love to get an old book from an Irish author from a shop in Ireland. So we went into this little bookstore and they had all of these old books. And I'm like, oh, Ulysses. I know that one, right? Like I know James Joyce. I recognize the name. I had read some of his other stuff and I liked it. I read all his short stuff, like Portrait of the Artist as a
his short stories are amazing and way easier to handle than his fiction. I mean, his fiction was really meant to upend language as we know it. And to that extent, some people would say he did it. Some people would pull it off. Some people would say he pulled it off. I've never read all of Ulysses. I mean, I've just kind of dipped my nose into it to just go, okay. And I'm sure it's worthy of the full attention and all that it gets. But I'm like, it's so removed in terms of time and context for me that it's sort of like, what's the benefit to effort ratio here? And I don't know, someday, but I hear you, pal. So
I was in this shop, and there was a young woman at the counter, and I said, I want that. And like there was this whole pile of old books behind her. It was a special shelf, and I said, I want that Ulysses. And she looked at it, and she's like, this one, and it's from 1956. I find out later, so it's hardcover, 1956.
Nice.
And it's kind of beaten up and stuff. And she said, we have like 50 of the new ones with the nicer covers. And it's like, no, I want that one. This one was important. because it was old that she didn't understand. She was in a different place in her life. But I've tried to read that so many times. And it was only last year, last Bloomsday, a mutual friend of ours, a couple of mutual friends of ours are in Charlottetown, and we went to the Bloomsday celebration here. And the day it got explained to me how the different chapters worked. And it was exactly what you just said. It was like, okay, in this chapter, they're doing this, and here's how we use language here. Here's what he was dissecting there. But without that common theme and explanation, I just got frustrated because it didn't read the same chapter by chapter. It wasn't a story that way. It was more about how to examine language.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really pleased the English major and English teacher and I suppose the writer in me is quite pleased at this kind of language, and I think, or this kind of topic rather. And I think this actually goes back somewhat to our recent grievances of ed tech episode. If I think of mine had been, to the effect of the supremacy or ascendancy or whatever grandiose term I put on it of the English language in terms of learning technology generally. So I think we're on to something pretty pertinent here, and I appreciate your bringing up the topic, dude.
Right on. So
Cool.
now I'm going to jump to the literature. So in 2011, Marshall, Menvez, Doherty, and Patterson wrote an article about interprofessional jargon.
Okay.
And that's what we have so much of in education. And basically what they said is the interprofessional context needs addressing. It is exclusionary. Somebody coming in, like every time I talk to somebody, like I go to physio a lot because I keep trying to do stuff like I'm 16. And as soon as people start giving me like that jargon, it's like, hold on, what does that mean in regular language? And of course, they're professionals, so especially in healthcare, you got to use that language a certain way. But when I talk to people, a friend of mine had a family member pass away suddenly out of the blue, and she used very precise language, and it's like, oh, I know what happened to you here. You had to be included in that culture of understanding what was going on with your family member. You had to learn that language, and it was phrased so precisely. So I understand in some professions why it needs to happen, but education isn't one of those. We don't need to be excluding people in education, in my humble opinion.
Well, and if I may go a step further, first of all of what you said is completely on point. I gotta feel like, particularly in the technology area, we do worse at that, even in other areas of the education endeavor. Every field has its own, and I think it's important. In the reference that you drew to that reference to power relationships, certainly language denotes hierarchies, denotes power structures, and even to the extent that you get over the original idea that English is a European language of conquest. It's a language of violence and colonization. And so to have that history, that legacy of violence and colonization and exclusion of people of color, of people of other language backgrounds and ethnicities, I mean, that all follows the English language, and it's sort of part of our heritage almost. One of the things that came up in this Stella Maris, this beautiful novel that I pretty much read all of it, almost all of it yesterday, is the premise of it is this supposedly schizophrenic 20-year-old woman who's had this incredibly tortured past shows up. She checks herself into a mental facility in Wisconsin. That's the start of the novel. And literally the entire novel is a conversation between her and her 40-something-year-old therapist, the psychologist who wants to write a paper about her. And it's literally the entire novel. And the key factor of it, which is, I am getting to the point, is that she's a mathematical genius. And she just has this complete genius level understanding. She's a doctoral student. She's 25 or 20 years old. And, she saw language and math as ultimately unable to accommodate her reality, because ultimately the endpoint of both of them is abstraction. And the distance between thought and everything that led to the history of language and the expression, that gap that a lot of scholars and people who know about this stuff much more than I do have spent a lot of careers have been spent just exploring what goes on between the subconscious until it manifests as action and thought. And that novel, it spends just dwelling on it in such a manner. So again, not to sort of go too far into the weeds here, but this has very much been on my thinking lately. So again, I appreciate that.
I remember a quote that's attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it's true or not. It sounds good if it is. And it's, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yet.
It's probably a good paraphrase. If that's the wording that he used, that's awesome. But even if it's a summary or a paraphrase, I think, and so when we're talking then about just the professional sphere of ed tech, you have, and we spend a lot of this show talking about it. You have people who aren't necessarily educators. So one of the ways you can sort of shore up, I suppose, your position, one of the ways you can justify what you're doing is to have this set of language that sort of supports that supports. So because the understanding there is that these codes, you participate in the cultures to the point that such language is natural to you, and that other non-specialists are missing out on something. And I've seen that come through when I was doing learning management support at an institution that shall remain nameless, learning management system support tickets, where people are kind of, again, not to cast, I've been guilty of it too, where it's like, oh, come on, they don't get it. And it's, you go into your little back channel, you go into your Slack channel or whatever, and then you have these negative little conversations about, people who just, they don't participate in your thing. And so by excluding them from what you're doing as a primary function, you're building yourself up without any real justification. Bit of a tirade there. Sorry, dude. But
no, yeah. That's part of the power hierarchy that stops communication from working. It is people trying to create their own position or elevate themselves or have their little silo of knowledge where they're the expert. And that leads us to the Con 2017 article about the 7 dirty words that undermine.
Please tell me that. Tell me, I'm doing an episode of the music podcast and later today, and we're talking about comedy records. Like we're just doing comedy recording albums.
George Carlin's.
George Carlin, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah, I honestly think that this author grabbed a great title, right? It's like as soon as it's the 7 dirty words, everybody of a certain age is going to know the reference to Carlin, whether they know the words, because he did the 7 words you can't say on television or however.
Exactly. It's one of his most famous routines. And that's actually a rare thing for an academic article to like grab something popular and go, oh, maybe it's worth it to try and get people's attention in this way. Perhaps remedy to this show is even just in terms of breaking down the discourse, and where we use a bit of humor, a bit of irreverence, a bit of silliness, to kind of come up with our own standpoint on it. I would like to think that others have that same, I guess, everybody does, because they want to get published. And it's not always conducive to that endeavor to try and write things that are popular. So
exactly.
Yeah, man.
So Kahn talks about how exclusionary language impedes the smooth operation of teams, and all members need to feel respected to perform their roles. Basically, that's what Kahn wrote. And if somebody's trying to elevate themselves and somebody's trying to say, hey, I'm better than, or hey, I'm in charge, so that means you, those things stop the smooth operation of teams and stop communication and stop learning. So there's a cultural
I have some experience
shift.
with that. I have some experience on a team that broke down from my standpoint, in as much as I was shunted off of it. So even the fact that one supposedly key team member is like removed from a core function of the team suggests that there was some discombobulation there. So again, I guess a bit of a personal resonance for me in that particular reading, pal, which again, I very much appreciate.
Yeah, and you didn't go off on a Carlin-esque rant?
I think this show has probably included some Carlin-esque rants over the past 40 whatever episodes. I'll be honest. I just, we're fulfilling a legitimate purpose here, and I wouldn't want it any other way, but nor can we deny our personal antecedents. When you get into situations where you're like, I'm an educator and I have to leave my personality at home, that almost sort of keeps in touch with in order to be authentic. So, like, speaking as a reformed English teacher, what we're always trying to do in the classroom is have students avoid jargon, put away the 50-cent words, get to the meaning as clearly and as straightforwardly as you can. Takes a lot of effort to make things simple, a lot of effort. And people think, oh, he just didn't put any effort into that because it sounds so simple, or she. But the fact is, actually, it takes a huge amount of effort to make something simple. And I don't want to put down people who don't get that, but I've had a few of them in my career and in my life. And I know I come across as an arrogant slacker sometimes, but still, you know. Anyway, pal, more digressions, but what can I say?
I'm sure you could say other stuff.
I could. But then where's the value? Where's the value to be delivered? Right. So, yeah, man.
So another component of, like, I'm not just slamming people that are elevating themselves. I'm not slamming leaders. I'm not slamming different communities. Another thing that can happen, is another reason why we have this issue with exclusionary language and jargon and 3-letter abbreviations is the Bernstein 2021 article that he just calls gobbledygook, or she calls gobbledygook. I'm not sure how they identify it. And gobbledygook. I used to kind of participate in the ESL field in my career, so this is very sweet to me. So why don't you tell us about this one more? This is good. So Bernstein has gone in and said, here's the problem with, like, English language teaching. And he lists, or she lists off, more than a dozen abbreviations. Like, a lot of people have heard English language teaching, English as a second language, teaching of English as a foreign language, all of those things. Bernstein has also listed EAL, EAP, EIAL, and he goes on and on and on and on. And the only thing he doesn't list is EIEIO from old McDonald. But there are so many there. And the acronyms are so subtle. How is anybody, especially an English language learner, going to know the difference?
It turns into alphabet soup. It just turns into a random grab bag of language. And this is where, okay, so I appreciate here the fact that we're kind of dialing into some of the things that we talked about during the grievances episode, because again, this strikes me as not just, the language of tech, English, as being an issue, but also the fact that we can't agree on any of our own professional terminology, and that it seems really centered on budgetary and procurement processes at any given institution, informing the context rather than, say, adopting some common terminology by, say, the government research bodies that cover this stuff as a starting point or whatnot. But the real disadvantage here is that apart from having no common language to describe a lot of these issues, is that lack of conceptual clarity ultimately trickles down to the learners. And that's when, like, what kind of program am I even in here? Why does this little bit of curriculum link to this? I mean, it's all part of the same cloth. And if you don't have the same material, the same linguistic, cultural material all the way through, then you're going to have a garment that breaks apart and falls to thread pretty quickly. I don't know if that's the best metaphor, but that's the one that came to mind. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, pal.
Well, you tidied up something Bernstein said, which I also think was exclusionary language, because one of the comments was a lack of standardized nomenclature. If I go out and talk to people on the street or talk to people at work and say, oh, yeah, we have a lack of standardized nomenclature, a lot of them are going to say, what are you talking about? Because nomenclature.
Can you repeat that in English?
Yeah. Can you make it non-exclusionary? And so in an article about how we have a jargon problem and how our language is exclusionary language is getting used. It's just one of those things.
And to be clear, I don't think either of us is speaking against using professional academic language to describe specific phenomena. But I think where sometimes the use of this jargon is harmful is when it comes with from when it isn't based on anything, when it isn't based on any conceptual framework. So like in the doctorate program, the biggest thing that really got instilled in me, one of the biggest things I can think of, is that you have to be able to justify everything you're doing. Every statement you make has to have a logical thing anchoring it. And if you just don't have that, they talk about epistemology and they talk about ontology, right? Being an expression, essentially. If those aren't aligned in a sort of worldview or conceptual framework, whether it's constructionism or social whatever, constructivism or behaviorism or whatever your bag is, if that part isn't thought out and you're just dropping down to the level of taking whatever terms are nearby and cobbling something together, I know that on the show we advocate for sort of a DIY approach to tech and teaching, but I think language and ideas, just because they rely so much on abstraction, you don't necessarily really have that luxury. I think it behooves everybody to put a good amount of thought into that. And I'm sorry, dude, I keep going off on these tirades.
No. I remember my first year teaching. I show up in August because school starts the first week of September, and I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm overwhelmed. I just finished my BED. I already have a history degree. I've been in schools my whole life. And somebody says, oh, yeah, this is the latest from Barnett House. And I'm like, Barnett House? What the hell is Barnett House? Right? Like, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
and what is it?
So 10 minutes later, after that conversation spins through with whatever the latest directive from Barnett House was, I'm like, sorry, I don't know what Barnett House is. Oh, that's the headquarters of the ATA. And I'm like, I know you think that's helping, but what's the ATA? And it was the Alberta Teachers Association. And Barnett House is the name of the building that somebody named back in 1930, whatever. And it's like, those pieces are exclusionary. They didn't help. You could have said the Alberta Teachers Association, you didn't, because I started teaching in Alberta.
Or even just
And
the Teachers Association for that matter.
Yeah.
Like, because you're in Alberta, you don't
you don't need that bit. But it's
yeah.
that kind of structure where it's like, okay, I'm coming in new to this community and I'm lost. Right? With those two things. So all the rest of what got said, the 10 minutes after that where they described
It
whatever,
was lost. You were flailing. You were uncertain. You were like,
I had no context. I
Yeah.
couldn't connect it to anything logical. I had no idea what they were talking about. I took a bunch of notes that were basically gibberish because it was all jargon. And you got to fill out form 007 or whatever. And it's like, okay, none of this makes sense. Why are we wasting our time? And we do that in classes sometimes where it's like, okay, you get 15 minutes or 20 minutes into a lecture and then somebody asks a really simple, basic question. And it's like, oh, okay, so they didn't understand any of the last 15 minutes because they didn't have that reference point that they needed to build their learning. So how can we change that?
Exactly so. No, that's a very succinct and it's just like operating language and operational culture sort of propelling an institutional narrative, and the institutional narrative is ultimately how people get paid and how they can sort of justify expenditure of public funds relative to what they're trying to do. And it's not unnatural, it's not abnormal, but it's something where I think on this show we try and advocate for a sort of mindful approach as much as we can. And I think if people were really thinking in the moment about not just, well, how do I get through this meeting or how do I get through this class? Like, what kind of tricks do I have to pull to kill this time? If you get out of that mentality and think, what's actually the best way to communicate in this setting? What's actually the thing that the people around me are going to benefit from the most? So this is why this podcast didn't burn out after the first 5 episodes of us kind of slagging off our shared previous employer, because that just would have been completely redundant, because it's just, what benefit is that to anybody other than us? Well, not really anything, except as perhaps a cautionary tale. But if that was the entire thrust of the show, like, I've got an axe to grind. It would have run out of steam. It would not be the endeavor that it is now. So again, I think there's some good linkage there to be had towards a mindful approach, if I can think of it that way.
Yeah, it reminds me, your comments are going to lead us right to the final article that I found. So thank you for that. But that approach that you just described reminds me of an interaction I had many, many years ago with somebody who was unpleasant to deal with.
Okay.
It wasn't at our former mutual employer. It was someplace else. It was more of like a social kind of family thing. And there was an interaction that happened, and I was wild. I was younger, and I was mad, and I was going to deal with it. And then it was basically, it was my mom. And no, she helped me. What happened was, there was an interaction where somebody was an arsehole. Somebody was a nasty arsehole, and I was full of, I'll take care of this. And then she just kind of looked at me, and I'm paraphrasing completely, but she's like, wow, that person is so damaged. I feel so bad for them. And as soon as she spun it to like a caring perspective instead of my emotional anger, I'm like, oh man, she's right. How can I be mad at this person? They're so damaged. What they need is help. They don't need me ripping them or getting into it with them. They need actual help. And
absolutely
me doing that,
true.
I get help.
that's what you get for having educators for parents, I'll say, which is awesome. My only caveat to that would be, and I appreciate your distinction that this happens sort of in social circumstances rather than, say, in a work setting, because in a work setting, damaged people occupy roles that significantly affect other people. And there's often the case in a lot of professional fields, not just education, where it's like, well, somebody's kind of difficult to deal with, and let them go or promote them or transfer them. And I've seen a lot of cases where it's just, let's stick them into management, and they're still a damaged person. And I mean, lots of examples for that. But yeah, no, it's so uh, that interaction that you had, good on you for having the presence of mind to seek an outside opinion about it, I would say.
Oh,
That's a major thing for you.
I didn't seek the outside opinion.
Oh,
She looked at me. She saw my body language in my face. She interjected the very insightful outside opinion, and she was completely right.
even better. Well done, Doug's mom.
Yeah, it was just, yes, you're right, but I still want to be mad. I still want to. Do you want blood on the floor, or do you want to solve the problem? I still wanted blood on the floor. But
part of you still does.
Right.
Nevertheless,
part of me still does. But
anyway,
I've moved on. Now,
well, I'm glad we had the chance to unpack that a bit, because I think anybody listening to this hopefully can sort of see, perhaps draw some similarities from our kind of abstractions of our experience, and maybe go, okay, I haven't had exactly this kind of situation, but I've been in something similar, or somebody I know has, or whatnot. And we're just two dudes trying to sort of make sense of our own thing and hope that it has some value for people. So the fact is, you can admit to wanting blood on the floor, which is an awesome turn of phrase, by the way. But still, the rational principle, and I want to bring stoicism into this, but I don't have those books handy at the moment. But it's okay to recognize the initial response, but then let that initial response go, and then sort of approach it from a rational standpoint. And yeah, I mean, that's a conundrum for a lot of younger people. That's something that's been a challenge for me over the years, for sure. It's something we can all do better at. So again, I appreciate the kind of universal truth that you're drawing here from this, Mud.
Yeah, blood on the floor came from an associate dean I had years ago, where I was running a class, and we had just changed our degree from a 3-year to a 4-year, and I had 400 plus students, and I had all these tutorial groups, and I had one person that was teaching some stuff, and I had bent over backwards to help her, and she was screwing me left, right, and center. And literally, like, I would send emails to her after she would do something, and it would take me an hour and a half to write the email. You know, those emails that have to be just perfect and just so.
I think I know. First of all, I think I know who you're talking about. I'm not going to guess, but I think just based on what you. Okay, maybe not.
No. This was back in Australia, so.
Okay.
If you do, I feel bad for you, because basically this.
Fair enough. No. You wrong continent. So. But still,
my first experience with sociopaths in academia.
Please make that the phrase of the podcast: sociopaths in academia, or blood on the floor. And
literally the associate dean.
I want to change the name of this podcast: Sociopaths in. I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good, because at the time it really stunk, and the associate dean was like, "Do you want this fixed? Do you want blood on the floor?" And I said I want it fixed, but I really want blood on the floor. But I'll take fixing it. It was one of those things. So it's not mine. I can't take credit for the phrase, but it's very exclusionary. without knowing anything else, you knew what that meant. So it was just part of how do we communicate clearly. And I just loved it. It was such an Australian phrase that I really enjoyed.
I think there's a strong case to be made for the apocalyptic vision of Blood Meridian, for instance. If anyone out there has read that novel, you could easily set that in Australia, but then I suppose it would be not unlike Mad Max. Actually, I think the latest person who's attached to direct the Blood Meridian film is, if I'm not mistaken, it's the same director who made the film The Road, which is another Cormac McCarthy film, novel turned into a film. And I believe that gentleman is Australian, and I believe that gentleman did this incredible 19th century revenge film with Nick Cave doing the soundtrack and everything set in whatever. So assuming that is all sort of conjecturally true, which I think it is, then, I mean, again, it sort of speaks to the universality of sociopathicity in education, dude.
Okay, I'm going to step off the sociopath.
It's making me silly. It's quite good. Okay. It's quite good.
The last article I want to talk about is Gordon Fierros,
okay,
from 2022. So it's very recent.
Yep.
And they talk about exclusionary languages in publishing.
Okay.
And this article was navigating the Anglophone scientific publishing world can be stressful and cause anxiety for many non-native English speakers.
Holy moly.
And they go in and they have a bunch of information in that where they've explored how much time and effort like non-English speaking native academics spend learning English and learning their discipline's English. And we're missing such a rich amount of information because English doesn't translate well. There's all those words in other languages that describe things that English doesn't describe well. Like you can't have certain feelings and you can't see certain things because English doesn't address it, but these other languages have perfect. Like there's a German phrase for I've been visited enough, so it's time for the visitors to leave my house. And it's just one phrase, and people say it, and nobody gets upset. It's like, oh, okay, they're done. Perfect. I would love that phrase because being Maritimers like we are, right? Like you got to slap your thighs and say, well, look at the time. And then you got to say goodbye like 17 times at the door to get somebody out, right? And I'm not saying I want everybody to get out, but sometimes you're just tired. But
it's just sort of like, what, you don't like me enough for the 15-minute goodbye? Come on, man. It's sort of part of the thing here. And again, just to speak to this beautiful, elegant novel that I have read this past weekend, it's just this is a case where math as a language doesn't exist independently of reality. Like if you were to factor out all the physical connections to math, would it still exist as its own thing? And that's one of the things that really drives the female character, the 20-year-old math prodigy, around the bend, because ultimately she can't resolve that, and her own identity is so subsumed in being an expert in this field and in this knowledge. She goes to Europe. She goes to just all these places to try and like there's a whole history of actual contemporary mathematics in this book. And if I wanted to sit down and use Wikipedia for every one of these, actual mathematicians, and there's like Oppenheimer in this because there's like the history of the nuclear bomb built into this, and it's all for a very rich narrative. And there are pieces of the English language which just don't resemble the English language. And part of that is, again, if you can't, without language, without abstract thought, there isn't language. And without abstract thought, how far removed are you really from a primate? More or less. The language, and again, it's spoken to this in that novel, like the part of the brain that actually invented language. I mean, what was the original reference point between just clicking sticks and the moon, right? Or whatever. How do you make that? And as the human capacity for language and abstract thought became more twinned, there's this whole additional, relatively modern part of the brain that's sort of evolved. And the conclusion that the main character comes to this, I don't think I'm giving a spoiler, is that ultimately language is a parasite in the human consciousness. That's one way of looking at it. Anyway, dude, so far into the weeds here. I feel like I'm just telling my book report, but anyway.
What I'm wondering is, because we're so Anglophone in this,
Yes.
Why are we taking a step back? Like I have friends from Europe that are multilingual, right? They speak 4, 5, 6, 7 languages, and trying to keep up with them in a conversation, they switch from language to language to language in a conversation because that language explains that concept better.
Yes.
And they roll with it. And it's beautiful to watch. I don't understand a whole lot of it because my language skills aren't there. And so that rich creation of knowledge happens, but you got to only publish in English, basically. And so it's why are we devolving that? Why are we getting rid of so much of that richness and so much of that explanation and detail and saying, now put it in that? Why are we excluding them?
No, totally. And again, I have to think that it's sort of like, part of me sort of thinking to the how it wasn't until like the 1960s that the Catholic Mass could be delivered in language other than Latin, right? Than the Vatican Latin. So you think about that. I mean, that's again like a source of a political entity exerting very meaningful power through just the accepted norms of the day vis-a-vis a language. And so it's very much again, the only thing I can sort of, one other thing that's sort of niggling at me here, which I think I could speak to probably for the show, would be that I've been using some AI apps at work lately for language, like generative AI, to use language reconstruction. And I had this awesome / weird moment where first couple days back at work after the holidays, we have a need to take a lot of textual material at my job and render it through a voice, just having somebody read it. So I can sit there and read the thing and record it, but it's going to have all the imperfections and, you know, the ums and the ahs and the you knows. I've been literally trying to, every time I catch myself in this episode saying, you know, I'm like, that better be the only time for the next 12 or 5 minutes or whatever. So then in this case, with this generative AI solution, I just spoke like 5 seconds. I uploaded like an MP3 of just whatever of my voice. And just based on a very limited sample, it was able to create a clone, an AI clone of my voice. And then I just copy and paste the text that I want and insert it into a field of sorts with that, you know, language overlay. And then takes about 10 seconds to populate like a 2, 3, 4 minute clip of AI Matt reading this thing. And it's a pretty benign application. It's pretty straightforward. Does it save me tons of time? Yes. Does it involve lots of quality? Does it solve a lot of quality control issues? Yes. Is it extremely weird and unsettling? Kinda. So I don't think I'm going to stop using it. I don't think I'm going to stop experimenting it, but it's language now is becoming even more of a hybrid between technology and the mind, where software and hardware are kind of filling in that gap that we talked about between concept and expression. Media mediation, as it were, right? Man, this is a topic where I got so many tangents that I want to go on here, but we are actually anyway.
Do you
Please feel free to add to that or move us along here, Doug.
No, I know that you're a reforming language teacher.
Yeah.
So as soon as I threw language into the title, I knew you would be able to run with some stuff, and I just knew that was going to happen. So
I appreciate
I'm not trying
it,
to be rude.
No, that's dope. I appreciate it, pal. So we got some pretty awesome illustrations here for this episode, if we're going there.
To try to tease people to come to the website, I found this Nova Scotia units of measurement. I'm from the province of Nova Scotia. I'm representing Nova Scotia now with my clothes. And if you want to get directions someplace, who knows where, right? And I'm guilty of this too when I'm home. But if somebody says, "Oh, it's right next door," that's a mile or two at least. Right up the road is somewhere less than 10 miles. A couple of miles is like 20 miles. Not too far is somewhere less than an hour. A pretty good haul, a fair ways. These are words, and we know what the definitions are, but we're the insiders. We know what that means. So it just made me chuckle when somebody actually wrote them all down.
That was fantastic. I put that one at the top of your notes for that one. That was I can relate. I think that's fairly. You could make some minor variations for that, and it would apply to New Brunswick, PEI, or possibly Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's sick, man, in the best possible way.
And I did include the 7 dirty words for healthcare that Con came up with. So they're there if people want to take a look. It's just one of those things. The one I really like is how I've changed professionally and personally.
Yep.
And over the last, because I've been teaching for about 32 years now. And there's one here that another teacher has posted, and it's like, after 25 years of teaching, I realized my favorite thing to say when a student walks in late is, "I'm glad you're here." Because that's inclusionary. It's not, "Why are you late? Sit down and be quiet. Don't make a ruckus. Why did you even bother coming this late?" It's, "I'm glad you're here." And that's the most inclusionary thing I could think of. So that's just where I'm at right now.
That's somebody who accepts their role and isn't trying to make a career out of rule enforcement. That's just somebody who actually is trying to welcome people and is coming at it from it's just a positive approach as opposed to something other. So that's awesome, man.
Thanks. So there's some others there that are just cute, and they were in my digital clutter. So if people want to take a look,
shout out to that man.
Yes,
that was a good one. I that was out of the newspaper strips. I mean, it's never as popular as Garfield, but about the same level as like The Wizard of Id or Herman or something like that. Mother Goose or Grimm. So that one's good, yeah. And
so I have 3 last things: the word, phrase, and the question of the podcast.
Fantastic.
So word of the podcast is inclusion, because we were talking about exclusionary language. So inclusion is what I'm looking for. Question of the podcast is, how can educators use language that is inclusive rather than so much exclusive jargon? Because
Precisely.
we so much. And we didn't even get into different content discipline areas. It's just in general is what we talk about.
Well, knowing us and knowing this show, we'll probably do a follow-up episode or at least speak to this over again. My question here about your question, pal, did you mean exclusive or did you mean exclusionary?
I think I meant exclusive.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
I'm just trying to play with the language myself to
Absolutely.
to
Nope.
see
Just
what the
wanted
spin is.
to just wanted to see if you had anything specific in terms of differentiating that, but in the purpose of experimentation, that's equally legit, man. So
I'm going to have to think about that now. That's good.
that's
I like
cool.
thinking. So that
No,
works out well.
I've been playing language and concept games with this novel, and I've actually, after I put it down, I started reading the follow-up, The Passenger, which tells the same story, but from completely different perspective. So it's just, anyway. I blame Cormac McCarthy and coffee for my diatribes this morning. What's our phrase of the podcast?
Okay. You threw a wrench in that, so we have phrases of the podcast.
Okie doke. What's the first one?
The first one is, it takes a huge amount of effort to make things simple.
Takes a huge amount of effort to make things simple. I'm going to put an exclamation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was, you brought that up, and I liked the way you phrased it.
Okay.
But then
awesome.
you announced that you wanted something different. So sociopaths in academia would be
sociopaths which is so brilliant. And I'm even going to put slash, and then I'm going to put in academia, and I'm going to put a slash after that, and I'm going to put in quotation marks blood. Make blood on the floor. I think I may even make blood on the floor. I'm actually going to go into the post now, and I'm going to add a category for the metadata, and that category is going to be, add a new category. I'm doing it right now in WordPress. Behold the ed techness of it all. Blood on the floor. And I'm going to put the quotation marks around it as well, because I feel like this is something I'm going to want to speak to later on, potentially, or that we might. Anyway, dude.
Well, talking about speaking to it later on.
Yep.
When we came up with our list, before we started this podcast a year and a half ago, we came up with a list of like 10 ideas that we wanted to talk to. This was one of the 10. So we get there. It was in our digital clutter. We eventually arrived. So, and I know we can talk about it.
Train across the hostile, desolate territory, which cares not whether we live or die, through its own machinations, both eternal and beyond eternal. That's just me kind of. If I was an AI trying to create some random Cormac McCarthyisms, it might sound like that. But absolutely true, bud. Absolutely true.
And that's all I've got.
Well, if that's all you got, then I guess probably for now, that's all I've got. I got to say, Doug, again, awesome topic. Appreciate this very much. We're going to definitely be honing back in on this in some way, shape, or form going forward, because quite frankly, this enterprise is something that I just value too much to want to. It would be a shame to envision it ending at any specific point right now, right? So it's. I would just like to say thanks anybody who's out there checking this out in whatever way, with whatever intention. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next time, I suppose. Anything else there, Doug?
Nope, that's it. Have a great day.
Oakley dokley do, neighborinos. Bye for now.